Hello everyone, it's Safa. I'm here at Presidio Park, San Diego, coming to you with another video about emotional processing. I've been wanting to make this one for a while, as it is a subject that I feel is so incredibly important for us to understand in this life. As I said in my previous video about emotional processing, or an introduction to emotional processing, we are manifesting from our emotions. And if you understand what manifestation is at all, then, maybe you'll have a gist of what I'm talking about, but I'm going to make a video directly after this and how emotions relate to manifestation. But first, I'm going to talk about triggers. So for me, as someone who has suffered from complex post-traumatic stress, and having that be labeled a disorder, and identifying with the label of mentally ill, of traumatized, of trauma survivor, of all of those, I've gained an incredible understanding of my mind and how it works. Because when I was feeling anxious and not being able to function and all of these things, I wasn't incredibly aware of it in the past. And I was doing things to suppress it, and I didn't even know why I was doing those things. I was an addict of various substances, alcohol being the main problem. But since understanding triggers, since understanding emotional processing, I've been able to overcome that, and that's why I think it's so important for me to share this information. So, basically, what they tell you in the PTSD videos and books is that our fight or flight mechanisms, otherwise known as the affect system or the psychosomatic response to stimuli, is there as an evolutionary tool to help us to escape from lions, tigers, and bears. Oh my. And that it's really not something that should be deemed useful in the modern day. It's an outdated response system. It's an outdated program. I do not share this view. I think that where they're coming from is, it's genuinely attempting to soothe the reader into a sort of like, yeah, you're an animal, this is natural, you shouldn't be ashamed. So it's like, basically, yes, you should not be ashamed of having triggers. Yes, it is a universal experience. Everyone is triggered all the time. And if you watched my last video, I explained it for a brief moment about what the affect system is. Essentially, everything that's happening around you is being reflected within you. So as above, so below, as within, so without. And this is a part of the manifestation. But what most people don't realize is what's going on in your conscious mind is often a product of the subconscious attachments. And to talk about the subconscious is a really deep topic. Carl Jung referred to it as the collective unconscious, the subconscious. And in my opinion, the subconscious is what connects us to the collective unconscious. So it's sort of a connective mechanism. So there's a bigger reality to our minds, what they are connected to in different dimensional planes, and what runs throughout those planes is associations with things. So on a basic level, our brain makes associations as we learn. As we grow up, we learn to associate naturally, for example, the sight of a flower with the scent, with a good smell. So the natural response when you see a flower would be to go up and smell the flower. Now, that doesn't necessarily reflect reality, because you may be disappointed by what you find. You may smell the flower and find that it has no smell, or that it has a smell that's a bit strange. So that's just one example. of how the mind can trick us into thinking that what's right in front of us is what we have also experienced in the past. And this is why people say it's not necessarily a reliable system. I tend to have the viewpoint that what we need to do about our triggers is recognize that they're there, and how we do that is by grounding into our senses. And this is what I learned in cognitive behavioral therapy when I was healing from my PTSD, was to be in my body. And as you can see, I'm literally lying on the ground right now. Things like this help as well, especially if you feel a personal connection association with nature and comfort, which I do. Not everybody does. So that's the important thing, is like what brings you comfort is important. What is a good way to define comfort? Okay, so comfort may be something that allows you to cope and isn't necessarily a mechanism for healing. So for example, cigarettes might provide a source of comfort for you because of the association with friends and socializing, or being cool, being accepted, whatever it is, it'll provide that trigger to stimulate a physical response in the body. So if you are addicted to something and you're using it as a coping mechanism rather than healing yourself, that may be something that you want to look at, is what it is triggering within you. And of course, things like being in nature, that's a healthy addiction. Obviously you can't really get fucked up on flowers. I'm just gonna say it like that. You can't really hurt yourself unless you're allergenic, to certain things. So there's all different kinds of factors in healing and recognizing your triggers, and what types of good associations that you can form, and how you can look at the current associations that you have formed. One good example that my therapist used was a client who was adverse to red shoes because of an abuser that wore red shoes. So obviously red shoes aren't bad in and of themselves, but what can happen is that the ego can attach itself to our triggers and identify with the triggers. So that is to say that if I encountered a thing at all, if I've encountered a thing and it makes me feel bad, then that thing is bad because I see it as bad. So this is where the I comes in, is that what we learn to associate ourselves with our triggers instead of being able to see that it's an attachment. And why we become attached is, something that Teal Swan goes into with her completion process, which I talk about a lot. But I find that it's incredibly healing for me to, at least attempt to allow the memories to come up of what emotion is associated, what memory is associated with the emotion that I'm feeling in the present moment. And involves being there for the emotion, feeling the emotion, and allowing yourself to see the original trauma, and to do a visualization within that changes the association. So the psychosomatic response becomes something different when you make it something different. You take personal responsibility for that trigger when you find the original root of the particular emotion that you're experiencing. And what usually happens, and what I'm going to talk about in the next video about manifestation, is we're attracting things into our reality that are a like vibration to that which is going to trigger us into past traumas. And this is complicated too, because we may trigger off of good things in our life, not just things that remind us of abuse and things. We may trigger off of good experiences that we've never had before, because it's so foreign and so ridiculously hard to conceive that the body's immediate response is panic. I don't know what to do with this. I don't know what I'm going to do without this. There are so many different things that can happen. So the biggest skill that you can learn to manage your triggers right now is to learn how to be in the present moment with your feelings. First, before you do any of the past processing, the number one thing you can learn to do and just cultivate is to learn how to feel the feelings that are in your body right now and not resist them, because they're a message trying to show you something, trying to show you the association that you've made in childhood and how that is affecting your future, how the now is affecting your future, how it's all connected in the ethers as well. Time outside of this is much different. Just want to say that without necessarily going too deep into it. I hope I have time to make this next video because that's really important to me. But yes, so becoming mindful and allowing yourself to observe your thoughts, observe your emotions from a neutral perspective. It's not wrong to have these thoughts. It's not wrong to have these emotions. It is how my mind works. It's not personal. I'm not a freak. I'm not a failure. There's nothing wrong with me for having this mechanism that literally every other creature on Earth has just to survive. The fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Check out the Pete Walker website. If you have PTSD, go look at Pete Walker, or Google Pete Walker, go to, I believe it's PeteWalker.com, but he has a lot of really great writings on these responses, which are there to help us survive, obviously, but have the ability to wreak havoc in our lives as well. You know, as somebody who experienced the negative effects of my triggers, you know, at work, in relationships, it's been a harrowing journey up until now, where I feel like I can just calmly associate with things and see them from an objective perspective and say, yes, I'm triggered by that. If I have an emotional response, yes, that is a trigger for me. Instead of, that thing is evil and I need to get away from that thing, or that thing is evil, or I need to find a way to have control over or destroy, or whatever impulse that you have. If it's fight or flight, or I don't know what to do, I'm numb, I'm freezing, or to literally make yourself meek towards that trigger. Like if it's a person who's dangerous, then that could be a very bad thing. If you are triggered by a person's dangerousness and you trigger into a fawn response of, oh, I'm so friendly, I'm not a threat to you, I'll do anything, that is actually quite scary. So this is why it's so good to be aware of what these things are, is because it's about your own personal safety. And we have tools. And you know, we have the ability to learn about our bodies, about our ethereal bodies, which I'm going to be talking more about, how the soul is attached to karmic experiences that create triggers, that triggers and karmic experiences are basically the same thing. Understanding these things has opened up my life to the realm of possibility. Also, there are archetypal experiences that we have which can be alchemized. So one archetype can have both sides, two sides. So how you see the feelings of yourself within an archetypal situation, how you view that situation is the same as like how you view a trigger. I've had a lot of really intense realizations around things like colors, how our brain is triggered by certain colors into the associations it has with that color. And that is how we relate to the world on the level of survival. And also culturally, how color, you know, plays into how we design our clothes and our costumes, and what it means to have a certain color on, and what it means to be engaging in an artwork with a certain color. And this goes the same with smells, and this goes for the same with textures, and this goes for the same with, you name it. There is a sort of bell curve with triggers too. These things are going to trigger most people in the same way, but there's always outliers. There's always people who are going to trigger differently to the same thing that you know, trigger in a totally different way. So it's really important to understand that two different people can trigger differently towards the same thing, and it's still a trigger, and it's still a psychosomatic response. So with all that in mind, just become aware of how you're feeling, and check out the completion process if you want. Check out any inner child work type process that deals with emotions, and just give it a try for yourself. And continue to surround yourself with things that trigger a good psychosomatic response as well, because you deserve it. You deserve that comfort, and that is what self-care is. Thank you so much, everyone. Stay healthy, love yourselves, like and subscribe. Blessed be.